Howdy, folks, and welcome to Moose Podcast 175. Been an exciting past week. Can't wait to get into it. But I'll start by thanking so many of you for all you're doing for the Moose Podcast. First, thanks for tuning in. I'm really grateful. Second, you guys, some of you are really working hard on my behalf, the podcast behalf, to get the word out. And I am truly grateful. So thank you. Also want to thank my good friends at Bedford Camera for sponsoring the Moose Podcast. So head to bedfords.com, make all your purchases like I just did with my D6, and then as you check out, make sure you check that discount, put in MOOSE for your special discount. Remember, they're also going to give you free shipping over $99, and for a lot of states, no sales tax, and at the same time, say thanks for sponsoring the Moose Podcast. Well, slight deviation before I get going. Yes, the Nikon D6 did come out. Pre-order is supposed to be available in April. Yes, I've pre-ordered and paid for mine. I can't wait to get them. And from that's all I can tell you right now. Excited. But let's get right into this week's podcast. Confused in California. Got an email, and this past week, that has 5, 6 really, really good questions. And I thought I would just simply answer these questions. It was easier for me to actually do it in a podcast versus sending an email because I can kind of elaborate a little bit more. You can understand a little bit more what I'm saying as far as inflections and stuff, and perhaps it might help you. So, dear Confused in California, your first question. For those people who don't see growth improvement in their work over time, what might be a solution? You know, that's a really great question. A lot of photographers really are looking for that improvement. And as I mentioned in the On Demand podcast, a lot are really wanting that improvement quick. But this one says very clearly, over time, and that's an important part. Well, first reminder is as you get better in photography, improvement comes in smaller increments. That's the first thing to keep in mind. 2, if you are, for lack of better terms, not getting outside your comfort range, that will also slow down your perceived improvement. But lastly, if you don't stop being hard on yourself, you'll never improve. Photographers, God, love you guys, but man, 2 things. 1, you're really hard on yourselves in your photographs, and a lot of times you take that out, I think, on new camera gear with really silly posts about things that aren't even in your hand yet, about others' photographs, but mostly about your own photographs. If you, for example, went out every day and you were to take a perfect photograph, wouldn't it be over with? I mean, you'd be done. And then what would you do? I don't know, coin collecting, right? Now, the next thing that's really important to understand is there is no scale for growth and improvement, right? That's a personal judgment call. Now, Confused in California asks, what might be a solution? I can only give you the one thing that I do myself. Whenever I start feeling like that's the case, is I tend to go to someplace new. And if you've been watching the blog and the website here for the last 18 months at least, I've been going to a whole lot of new locations. I've mentioned it before. And why am I going to those new locations? 1, because I want to see them before they disappear. And 2, new locations push me. They make me grow. They make me improve. Now, it might not be a location for you. It could be a new genre of photography. It could be a new subject. It could be a new camera body. It could be a new lens. You know, a new lens, if you rent one for a week or 2, you'd be surprised if all of a sudden you just kind of got out of your own way, how that might be a solution. Because the next question kind of feeds onto that one. How does one measure growth? Well, I might have a problem helping a lot of people here because for myself, that measure of growth for myself is because there's a business attached. I look at how many images are going out, how many are actually being published, and what's that percentage. That's part of how I visualize and determine growth. Two, the other way I measure growth is how many images am I actually adding how many images am I actually adding to not my files, because that's not really relevant, I don't think, to what I call my gallery folders. My gallery folders are where I put the photographs that I like and I have finished. That's where I store those, as little gallery folders. And those are images that, often illustrate the website and my articles and my books. And it's how many am I adding to that? That's one way that I measure growth. I'm sure there are others, but that's the way I do it because it's numerical and I can deal with that. And then the next question I think is really kind of interesting. Is it wrong to attempt growth? Is it perseverance? Is perseverance enough? No, as far as I'm concerned, perseverance is not enough. I mean, that's why we go to college. I mean, not to become out, wizards, but just to prove we got through the system, right? And we lived to have a piece of paper on the wall. No, I think it's a very important thing to continually not attempt growth, but succeed at growth. Just don't put this measure on growth that it's such a big number, it's such a big scale, that it's now a task or a chore rather than a pleasure and a passion. But yeah, every time I go to some location, and folks that have been on my adventures of late, one of the things I'm challenging with is what's their photographic goals for just that week we're shooting together. It's a very short-term, small thing, but what do you expect from yourself? And I think if you understand what you expect from yourself, your photography goes along with it because they're very closely related. And still on the same kind of line, next question Confused in California asks is, how closely is growth related to having a specific photographic purpose? I mean, that's really a great question because speaking again personally, for so long, for 20 years, I'm going to say 25 years, mine was strictly photographing California's threatened and endangered critters. And the continual expanding of that inventory or files or photographs, that was, how I did it. I'm going to say to some extent, while I succeeded photographically, personally, and emotionally, I think it did not help me because there's a lot of negatives involved in dealing with endangered species and species that you see go extinct. There's a lot of pressure to make things happen that financially, there's not going to be any income, but, passionately you have to do. So how closely related is growth related to having a specific photographic purpose? I would not relate the two now that I know what I know. Photographic growth has to come from the smallest of things, the littlest of accomplishments. I think that growth, and along with anything else we do in our lives, right? Just doing a task and completing it. I don't know, taking out the trash, painting a house, tuning up a car, whatever it happens to be, no matter how big or small, just the feeling of accomplishment, even if it might be short term, is worth doing that because of that small little bit of growth that comes from that. So, no, I would not tie it to a photographic purpose. I would just tie it to photography. So then Confused in California goes on and says, why is it so easy to see the good things about others' work, but not our own? Damn, is that a good question? But the answer to me is very quick and simple and obvious. It's because others' photographs, two things. One, you have no emotional connection to the creation of that photograph. And two, your imagination is running wild in how that photograph was actually created. You have no idea what the other photographer has done. For example, a funny side note, I had a president of a camera club. He was talking to me, and they found out that one of their members had gone and actually taken photographs from somebody else way on the other side of the planet and then used them as his with small alterations. Well, right, if you looked at this guy's photographs, you go, wow, that's amazing. Another example, most people don't realize that a lot of folks take nice landscape shots. Then they go to the NASA website and they're grabbing the heavenly body pictures from NASA and they're just in Photoshop combining them. And people go, that's really cool. Until you see a photograph like a Joshua tree, which is in California, and the Southern Cross is in the sky. It's like, one's Northern Hemisphere, one's Southern, So looking at someone else's photographs, it's the other, the lawn is greener, scenario. And then we are way too hard on ourselves. And we know what we put in that photograph, and we always will say, well, I could have done more, but that's true for every photograph. So that's why it's easy to see the good in other photographs where we can't see it in our own. And it's because we just need to take those binoculars and turn them around. And then you'd find, your stuff is a lot better, and the other stuff, maybe not so much. Then his last question, which I thought was really kind of interesting. So Confused in California finishes his email by saying, can the ego ever be truly separated from the work? That's a really damn good question. My dad always told me that only I could toot my horn because others don't want to toot your horn. In fact, that especially in this day and age, you deal with all the haters out there and the misinformation. So that ego, can it truly be separated from your work? I don't know if the word ego is the right word, but right off the bat, can it be separated ever? Truly? No, I don't think so. Because that ego in some part is the drive that pushes what? The passion, right? The passion is what keeps you doing it over and over again. And the ego in some part, some form is what, drives you to what? Answer the other questions that Confused in California asked. That ego is kind of why you're worried about growth and improvement is because you have an ego, right? How does one measure growth? Well, that's partially your ego. Is it wrong to attempt growth? Again, ego, and how closely related is growth related to specific photo purposes? That's probably the only one where ego is not really part of the equation. Now, people like loves, people like likes on their stuff. Is that ego or something else? I think it's something else. People will say things in forms that I think they shouldn't say. Is that ego or something else? I think that's ego, right? Is ego bad? It's like anything. I love chocolate cake, but if you eat the whole cake at one time, it's bad. A little sliver, when the doctor's not looking, not so bad, okay? I think moderation is kind of that way with ego. I think that the biggest part of ego that plays in photography is the part that I've encouraged all of you to do for so long, and that is to share your photographs. That ego has to get you to do that, and, self-confidence has to get you to do that, and getting past your shyness and your awkwardness, I think that's part of the ego as well. So, Confused in California, I want to thank you for sending me, really, a podcast. And I hope that some of this has not only helped you, but all the rest out there who are listening, and I'm grateful for that. Well, I've got another great week. I don't know about you folks, but here in the Eastern Sierra, it was an incredibly beautiful spring day. We have almost no snow on our property. A lot of dirt is showing up. It's a dry winter, which is sad, but we've got a lot of birds coming back already, which is cool. I'm about to go off shooting more birds this week. And I had an amazing time a couple weeks ago in Skagit Valley, another new location that, again, pushed the buttons and made things a challenge, and some photographs came from it. And that's really what it's all about. So thanks for tuning in, and remember to make every click your story.